The first time Yates Lawson saw the orc girl collapse in his wheat field, he thought she was dead, and his immediate instinct was to fetch his rifle before he remembered that dead things did not need shooting. The summer sun hung merciless and white in the cloudless sky, turning the air itself into something thick and punishing, and she lay face down in the dirt between the rows of golden stalks like something discarded by a careless god. He approached slowly, pitchfork in hand, though he felt foolish carrying it, because what exactly was he planning to do if she woke up and decided to tear him apart? The stories he had grown up with painted orcs as monsters who could rip a man's head from his shoulders, who raided villages and ate livestock whole, who knew nothing of mercy or kindness. But as he drew closer, he saw that she was small for an orc, probably no older than 20, with green skin that had gone pale and dusty from dehydration, and her leather clothing was torn and stained with old blood that was definitely not human. He stood over her for a long moment, debating with himself, knowing that the right thing to do according to every law and custom of the borderlands was to either kill her or ride to the nearest town and report her presence, so the militia could come deal with it. But Yates had never been particularly good at doing what he was supposed to do, which was why he lived alone on a struggling homestead 3 miles from the nearest neighbor, instead of married with children like his mother had always wanted. He set the pitchfork down and knelt beside her, pressing 2 fingers against her neck where he guessed a pulse might be, and felt the flutter of life still beating there beneath skin that was burning hot to the touch. She was dying of heat stroke and thirst, and whatever moral complexity existed in the situation, he could not watch a living thing die when he had the means to prevent it. Getting her into the house proved harder than he had anticipated because even small orcs were dense with muscle, and by the time he had dragged her limp body across the yard and through his door, he was soaked with sweat and breathing hard. He laid her on the floor of his main room because the bed was too far and she was too heavy, then fetched water from the well and a clean cloth. He had seen heatstroke before, had nearly died of it himself his first summer working this land, so he knew the procedure even if he had never performed it on an orc. Cool water on the pulse points, small sips if she could swallow, shade and stillness and time. He wet the cloth and pressed it to her forehead, her neck, the insides of her wrists, and gradually the deathly pallor of her green skin began to improve. She did not wake that day or that night, and Yates found himself checking on her every few hours, bringing more water, adjusting the cloth, wondering what in all the hells he was going to do when she did wake up. He should have let her die in the field. He should have ended it quickly with the pitchfork. Instead, he had created a situation that could get him killed or arrested or both, because harboring an orc was illegal in 3 of the 4 territories that made up the borderlands, and frowned upon severely in the 4th. But he had committed now, and Yates Lawson was many things, but he was not a man who did things by halves. She woke near dawn on the 2nd day with a gasp that sounded like someone breaking the surface after nearly drowning, and her eyes snapped open, yellow and wild and full of animal panic. Yates had been dozing in his chair across the room and jerked awake at the sound, and for a moment they simply stared at each other in mutual shock. She tried to bolt upright and made it approximately 6 inches before collapsing back down with a groan, and he raised his hands in what he hoped was a calming gesture. "Easy," he said, keeping his voice low and steady the way he would with a spooked horse. "You have been sick, heat stroke. You need to rest." She bared her teeth at him, and he could see her small tusks protruding from her lower jaw, white against the green of her skin. "Where am I? My house. My homestead. You collapsed in my field 2 days ago." Her eyes darted around the room, clearly calculating escape routes and finding herself too weak to take advantage of any of them. "Why did you not kill me?" It was a fair question, and Yates did not have a good answer for it. "Did not seem right letting you die of thirst. Water is free." She looked at him like he was insane, and perhaps he was. "Humans do not help orcs." This one did, apparently. "Are you hungry?" The confusion on her face was almost comical, and he wondered how long she had been on the run, how long since anyone had shown her the slightest kindness. She did not answer his question, but her stomach did, growling loud enough that he could hear it from across the room. He rose slowly and went to the kitchen area, cutting thick slices of bread and cheese and bringing them to her along with a cup of water. She watched him with deep suspicion as he set the food beside her, close enough to reach but not so close that he invaded her space. "My name is Yates," he said. "Yates Lawson. This is my land. I work wheat mostly, some vegetables. It is not much, but it is mine." She did not offer her own name, but she did reach for the bread after he stepped back, tearing into it with her teeth like she had not eaten in days, which she probably had not. He let her eat in peace and went outside to do his morning chores, feeding the chickens and the 2 goats, checking the irrigation channels, trying not to think about the fact that he now had an orc woman in his house, and absolutely no plan for what came next. When he returned an hour later, she had finished the food and pulled herself into a sitting position against the wall, though the effort had clearly cost her. She watched him enter with those unsettling yellow eyes, and he could see her mind working, trying to figure out his angle, trying to determine what he wanted from her. "You should rest more," he said. "You nearly died." "Why do you care if I died? I told you, did not seem right." "That is not a reason. It is the only one I have." She studied him for a long moment, and he studied her in return. In better health she would be striking, he thought, with strong features and dark hair that she wore in a braid down her back. Her ears came to elegant points, and there was something almost regal in the way she held herself, despite her obvious weakness. She wore leather armor that had seen better days, and he could see the hilts of 2 knives strapped to her belt, which he had not bothered to remove because what was the point of saving someone just to disarm them? "I am Kora," she said finally, and the name came out reluctant like she was giving away something precious. "Of the Ironridge clan, or I was. I am nothing now." "What happened?" Her jaw tightened, and he could see the pain flash across her face, pain that had nothing to do with heatstroke. "I was cast out, exiled, for being too soft, too weak, for questioning the chief's decision to raid a human settlement that had done us no harm. He said I had forgotten what it meant to be orc, and perhaps he was right." Yates lowered himself into his chair, processing this. "So you have been wandering alone for 3 weeks. I ran out of water 2 days ago, thought I could make it to the river, but I was wrong." She looked away, and he could see shame in her posture. "You should have let me die. I am no use to anyone anymore." "That is a stupid thing to say," Yates said, more sharply than he intended. "Being cast out does not make you worthless, just means your clan has poor judgment." She laughed at that, a bitter sound with no humor in it. "You do not understand orc ways. Exile is worse than death. It means you are nothing, that you have no people, no place in the world. It means you walk alone until something kills you. Or until you find a new place," Yates said. "World is bigger than one clan." "Is it?" She looked at him with something that might have been hope or might have been mockery. "Where exactly do you think an orc can go in human lands? Your people hate us, hunt us. The only orcs they tolerate are the ones who stay away." She was right, of course, which made the whole situation even more complicated. He could not exactly bring her to town, could not introduce her to his neighbors, could not explain her presence without raising 100 questions he had no good answers for. But he also could not throw her back out into the wilderness to die, not after going to the trouble of saving her. "You can stay here," he heard himself say, and wanted immediately to take it back but did not. "Until you are strong enough to decide what you want to do next. I will not force you to leave while you are still weak." The look she gave him was complicated, layered with disbelief and suspicion, and something else he could not quite name. "Why would you do that? What do you want from me?" "I do not want anything. I just do not think you should have to die in a field because your clan is made up of idiots." "You talk about orcs like they are reasonable people. Are you not?" She opened her mouth to answer, then closed it again, and he could see he had surprised her. Good. He was surprising himself too. He had not spoken to another person in nearly a month, and here he was offering sanctuary to an orc woman he had met less than 2 hours ago. His mother would have said he had lost his mind, and she would probably have been right. Kora stayed in his house for 3 more days, slowly regaining her strength, and Yates found himself adjusting his routines around her presence in ways that felt both strange and natural. He gave her his bed on the second night despite her protests, sleeping in the chair because he could not in good conscience make an injured person sleep on the floor. He cooked simple meals and shared them with her, and slowly she stopped watching him like he might attack her at any moment. She was not friendly exactly, but the hostility faded into something more like wary curiosity. On the 4th day, he woke to find her gone from the house, and his heart sank with an emotion he did not want to examine too closely. He pulled on his boots and went outside and found her standing in his wheat field, staring out at the rows of golden grain that rippled in the morning breeze. She turned when she heard him approach, and there was something raw in her expression. "I have never seen anything like this," she said quietly. "Fields, crops, growing things. Orcs do not farm, we hunt, we take, we move on. I never understood that humans could make food from the earth itself." "It is hard work," Yates said, coming to stand beside her, "but honest work. The land gives back what you put into it mostly. Is it enough to sustain you? Barely. This is my 3rd year. First year I nearly starved. Second year I broke even. This year I might actually make a small profit if the weather holds." He paused, then added, "It is lonely though. That is the part they do not tell you about homesteading, how quiet it gets." She glanced at him sideways, and he thought he saw understanding in her eyes. Loneliness is not only a human condition. They stood together in silence for a while, watching the wheat move like waves on a golden ocean, and Yates found himself acutely aware of her presence beside him, of the way the morning sun turned her green skin luminous, of the unexpected companionship of simply standing with someone who understood what it meant to be alone. It occurred to him that he did not want her to leave, which was a dangerous thought to have about an orc woman who had been in his life for less than a week. "I should go," Kora said, as if reading his mind. "I am strong enough now. You have been more than kind, Yates Lawson, more than I deserved. But I cannot stay, it will only bring you trouble." "What if I do not care about trouble? You should. You have a life here, land, a future. I will not be the reason you lose it. And what about your future?" He turned to face her fully, and she met his eyes with an expression that was equal parts fierce and sad. "Where will you go?" "I do not know. Away from human lands. Maybe west, to the wilderness beyond the territories. Maybe I will find other exiles, others like me who did not fit. Or maybe I will die out there. Either way, it will not be your burden." "What if I do not see you as a burden?" The question hung between them, heavy with implications neither of them was quite ready to address. Kora looked away first, her jaw tight. "You barely know me. I know you questioned your chief when he wanted to hurt innocent people. I know you were cast out for having a conscience. I know you would rather die alone than accept help that might complicate someone else's life. That seems like enough to know." You are a fool, she said, but there was no heat in it. Probably. But I am a fool with a wheat harvest coming up and more work than one person can handle alone. Stay for the season. Help me bring in the crop. After that, if you still want to leave, I will not stop you. But at least you will leave with money in your pocket and a clear idea of where you are going. She stared at him like he had suggested they fly to the moon. You want me to work for you. With me, not for me. Partners. I will split the profits. It is not much, but it is honest. Partners, she repeated, testing the word like it was foreign. A human and an orc partners. Why not? Stranger things have happened. Name one, he grinned. I cannot, but that does not make it less true. For a long moment she said nothing, and he could see the internal war playing out behind her eyes. The desire to accept fighting against every instinct that told her this was too good to be true, that there had to be a catch, that humans did not just offer orcs partnership and profit sharing. But finally, slowly, she nodded. 1 season, she said. I will stay for 1 season, and then we will see. 1 season, he agreed and held out his hand the way humans did to seal a bargain. She looked at his hand for a moment before taking it, and her grip was strong and warm and sent an unexpected jolt through him that he tried very hard to ignore. This was business. This was practical. This was absolutely not about the way her eyes caught the light or the fierce intelligence in her face, or the fact that he had not felt this alive in years. He was, as she had said, a fool. The work began in earnest the next day, and Yates quickly discovered that having an orc woman as a partner was both exactly what he needed and nothing like what he had expected. Kora was strong, far stronger than him, capable of lifting and carrying loads that would have taken him 2 trips or required the help of the mule he could not afford. She worked with a quiet intensity that suggested she was trying to prove something, either to him or to herself, and she asked questions constantly, wanting to understand not just how to do the work, but why it was done that way. Why do you cut the irrigation channels at an angle? She asked on the 3rd day, watching him work. So the water flows downhill naturally, uses gravity instead of effort. Clever. Orcs would simply carry water in buckets. That works too, but this way works while you sleep. She absorbed this with a thoughtful expression, and he could practically see her filing the information away. She learned quickly, mastering in days what had taken him weeks his first year, and he found himself explaining not just farming but his whole philosophy of working the land, of building something sustainable and lasting. She listened like every word mattered, and he realized he had been starving for this, for someone to talk to who actually cared about his answers. The heat that week was relentless, pushing into the upper 90s day after day, and they fell into a rhythm of working early in the morning and late in the evening, resting through the worst of the afternoon heat. It was during one of these afternoon breaks, both of them sitting in the shade of the house with cups of water, that she asked him why he had left whatever home he came from to break earth alone in the borderlands. I did not leave so much as I was encouraged to go, he said. I am the youngest of 4 sons, no land to inherit, no trade to learn. My father said I could stay and work for my brothers or I could try to make my own way. I chose my own way. Your family cast you out too then? Not exactly. They would have let me stay. But I would have been nothing there, just extra hands. Here I am building something mine. And it does not bother you, being alone. It did at first, but you get used to it. Loneliness is better than being surrounded by people who make you feel small. She nodded slowly, understanding in her eyes. Yes, that is why I could not keep silent about the raids. Better to be alone than to be part of something wrong. Your chief is an idiot for exiling you. Orcs need more people willing to question bad decisions, not fewer. Most orcs would not agree with you. We value strength and loyalty above wisdom. That seems like a good way to make terrible mistakes. It is, she said quietly, but try telling them that. They sat in comfortable silence after that, and Yates found himself studying her profile when he thought she was not looking, noticing details he had missed before. The way her tusks curved just slightly, the small scar above her left eyebrow, the precise green of her skin that was darker where the sun hit it. She was, he had to admit, beautiful in a way that was entirely outside his previous experience, and the realization made him uncomfortable because he had no business thinking of her that way. She was here for one season. She would leave. Anything else was fantasy. 2 weeks into their partnership, Yates made his usual trip to town for supplies, leaving Kora hidden at the homestead with strict instructions to stay out of sight. He returned that evening with flour and salt and fabric for new shirts, and found her agitated in a way he had not seen since those first fevered days. "What is wrong?" he asked immediately, setting down his parcels. "Someone came while you were gone, a man on horseback. He rode up to the house and called out for you." Yates felt his stomach drop. "What did you do?" "I hid in the wheat field like you told me to." He looked around for a while, then left. But Yates, he was carrying a rifle and he had a badge, some kind of law officer. Probably the territorial marshal. He makes rounds every few weeks, checking on homesteaders. Yates ran a hand through his hair, thinking, did he seem suspicious? I do not know. I could not hear everything he said, but he will come back, will he not? And what happens when he does? When he asks where you got help with the harvest. Humans do not work this land alone successfully, not in the first few years. She was right. He had been so focused on the immediate problem of keeping her safe and getting the work done that he had not thought through the longer-term complications. The marshal was not a bad man, but he was thorough, and if he suspected Yates was harboring an orc, he would have to investigate. It was his job. "We will figure it out," Yates said with more confidence than he felt. "Maybe I will tell him I hired help from the next territory over. Workers passing through. He will want to meet me, want to ask questions. Then we will make sure you are not here when he comes. You can hide in the hills until he leaves." Kora shook her head, frustration clear on her face. "This is what I meant about bringing you trouble. I should leave now before this gets worse." "No," Yates said firmly. "You agreed to stay for the season. We are partners. I am not breaking that agreement just because it might get complicated." "Complicated? Yates, they could arrest you, take your land, or worse. Let me worry about that." "Why?" she demanded, and there was real anguish in her voice now. "Why are you willing to risk everything for someone you barely know? It does not make sense." Maybe it does not have to make sense. He was surprised by the force of his own response, by the emotion suddenly thick in his throat. "Maybe I am just tired of doing everything the safe way, the expected way. Maybe I spent my whole life being the son nobody noticed and the brother nobody needed, and I am done with being invisible. You see me, Kora. You listen when I talk about irrigation and crop rotation like it actually matters. You work beside me like we are equals. Do you know how rare that is? Do you know how long it has been since someone treated me like I was worth more than the labor I could provide?" The silence that followed was immense, filled with all the things neither of them knew how to say. Kora stared at him with wide eyes, her lips slightly parted, and he could see he had shocked her. He had shocked himself too. He had not meant to say any of that, had not even known he felt it until the words were out. "Yates," she said softly, and his name in her mouth sounded like something precious. "I do not want to be the reason you lose everything. You are not. You are the reason I remember why I wanted to build something in the first place, not just to have land but to have a life, a real one. And that means having people in it who matter. I matter to you. Her voice was barely a whisper. "Yes," he said simply. "You matter to me." She looked away, and he thought he saw her blinking rapidly as if fighting back tears. When she spoke again, her voice was rough. "No one has ever said that to me before. In my clan, you only matter if you are strong enough, fierce enough. I was never enough. Then your clan is made up of fools who do not deserve you." She laughed at that, a watery sound, and wiped at her eyes with the back of her hand. "You have a very low opinion of orc culture. I have a very high opinion of you. The culture that cast you out is what I have a low opinion of." They stood there in the dimming light of evening, the space between them feeling both vast and non-existent. And Yates felt the urge to close that distance, to reach for her, to offer comfort in a way that was more than words. But he held himself back because he did not know if that was welcome, if she saw him as anything more than a strange human who had offered her sanctuary. The last thing he wanted was to make her uncomfortable, or to ruin the fragile partnership they had built. Kora made the decision for him, stepping forward and pulling him into an embrace that was fierce and awkward and perfect. She was nearly his height, and her arms were strong around him, and he could feel her trembling slightly, as if she was holding on to something she had thought she would never have. He hugged her back carefully, aware of her strength and his own comparative fragility, and for a long moment they simply held each other while the sun set and the crickets began their evening song. "One season," she murmured against his shoulder. "You said 1 season. That is what we agreed." "What if I want more than 1 season?" His heart kicked against his ribs. "Then we figure out how to make that work." She pulled back to look at him, and there was something fierce and tender in her expression. "It will not be easy. People will not understand. They will make trouble for you." "Let them. I am done living my life according to what other people think. You are very stubborn, Yates Lawson. You are not the first person to tell me that." She smiled then, a real smile that transformed her whole face, and he felt something in his chest expand and settle at the same time, as if a piece he had not known was missing had finally clicked into place. The weeks that followed were the best of Yates' life, though they were not without their challenges. The marshal did return, and Yates told him the story about hiring help from the next territory, and the marshal seemed to accept it, though Yates caught him looking around with slightly narrowed eyes. Kora stayed hidden in the hills during these visits, and Yates hated the necessity of it, hated that she had to hide like a criminal when she had done nothing wrong. But it was the reality of their situation, and they both learned to work around it. The wheat ripened to perfect gold, and they began the harvest in late summer, working from dawn until dark, cutting and bundling the grain. It was brutal work, even with two of them, and they fell into bed each night exhausted and aching. Yates had offered to go back to sleeping in the chair now that Kora was fully recovered, but she had refused, saying the bed was big enough for both of them if they were practical about it. So they slept side by side, careful not to touch, both of them acutely aware of the small distance between them and the larger question of what it meant that they wanted that distance to disappear. It was during the harvest that Yates truly came to understand the depth of Kora's strength and capability. She could work for hours without tiring, could lift bundles of wheat that he could barely budge, could keep a pace that left him struggling to match her. But she never made him feel weak or insufficient. Instead, she adjusted her rhythm to his, taking on the heavier tasks without comment, working beside him as a true partner rather than simply as labor he had hired. One particularly brutal afternoon, when the temperature had climbed above 100 degrees and the sun beat down like something solid and malicious, Yates watched Kora wipe sweat from her forehead and keep working, and felt a surge of admiration so strong it was almost painful. She had asked for nothing, complained about nothing and given everything to work that was not even her own. When he had asked her why she pushed herself so hard, she had simply said that she had made a commitment and she intended to honor it, and that was answer enough. But it was that same afternoon, when they had been working for 6 straight hours, and he could feel the heat pressing down on him like a physical weight, that he noticed Kora starting to slow. She did not say anything, but he could see the way she paused between bundles, the way her movements became slightly less coordinated. Heatstroke. She was heading for heatstroke again, and this time there would be no excuse for why he had to care for her, no way to explain it that did not reveal exactly how much she meant to him. "Break," he called out, setting down his scythe. "We need to stop." "We are almost done with this section," she protested, but he could hear the exhaustion in her voice. "I do not care. Break. Now." She looked like she might argue, but then seemed to think better of it and set down her own tools. They walked back to the house together, and he could see her swaying slightly, her green skin gone pale in a way that terrified him. He got her inside and into a chair, then fetched water and the cloth he had used that first day, pressing it to her forehead. "I am fine," she said, but her eyes were not quite focusing. "You are not fine. You are overheating. Drink this." He held the cup to her lips and made her take small sips, remembering the procedure, remembering how close he had come to losing her that first time. "I did not realize how hot it was," she admitted after a few minutes, and the vulnerability in her voice made his chest ache. "It is my fault. I should have been watching, should have made you stop sooner. I am not your responsibility, Yates." "Yes," he said quietly, still pressing the cool cloth to her skin. "You are. You are exactly my responsibility because I care about you and I will not watch you hurt yourself trying to prove how strong you are. You do not have to prove anything to me, Kora. Not a single thing." She looked at him with those yellow eyes that saw too much, and he watched something shift in her expression, some wall coming down. "I am not used to that. Someone caring if I push too hard. In my clan, if you could not keep up, you were left behind. Well, you are not in your clan anymore. You are here with me, and I will always make sure you are safe. Always. Do you understand?" "I think I am beginning to," she whispered. He should have moved back then, should have given her space, but he found himself frozen there, kneeling in front of her chair with the cloth in his hand and her face inches from his. The air between them felt electric, charged with possibility and terror in equal measure. She reached up slowly and touched his face, her palm rough against his cheek, and he leaned into the touch without thinking. "Yates," she said, and the way she said his name made something in him crack open. "I do not know how to do this. I have never, with anyone, and especially not with a human. I do not know the rules." "I do not think there are rules," he said. "I think we just figure it out as we go. What if I hurt you? Orcs are stronger. I could hurt you without meaning to. You would never hurt me, I know that. How can you know? Because I know you. Because you have been nothing but careful and kind since the day I found you. Because you would rather die alone in a field than bring trouble to someone who helped you. That is who you are, Kora. That is what I know." Her eyes were shining now, definitely tears this time, and his heart twisted at the sight. "No one has ever had faith in me before, not like this. Then everyone who came before me is an idiot." She laughed through her tears, and then somehow the distance between them disappeared and she was kissing him, tentative and fierce all at once, and his brain short-circuited completely. Her lips were softer than he expected, her tusks a strange and not unpleasant presence against his mouth, and she tasted like salt and summer, and everything he had been denying he wanted for weeks. He kissed her back with all the pent-up emotion he had been carefully controlling, one hand coming up to tangle in her hair, the other braced against the chair to keep from overbalancing. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, she looked as stunned as he felt. "Was that all right?" she asked, anxious. "I have never kissed a human before. I do not know if I did it correctly." "That was perfect," he managed. "That was absolutely perfect." "Oh, good." She smiled, shy and beautiful, and he wanted to kiss her again but forced himself to hold back because she was still recovering from heat stroke, and he needed to maintain at least a shred of sense. "We should get you properly cooled down," he said reluctantly. "And then we should talk about what this means." "Does it have to mean anything right now? Can it not just be what it is?" "I suppose it can," he said. "But Kora, you should know that this is not casual for me. You are not casual for me. I do not know how to explain it better than that." "Good," she said firmly, "because you are not casual for me either. You are the first person who has ever made me feel like I am enough exactly as I am. The first person who has made me want to stay somewhere. That is not casual." They looked at each other for a long moment, and Yates felt the weight of what they were beginning, the impossibility and the rightness of it in equal measure. They were a human and an orc in a world that would not understand, trying to build something against all odds and all logic. It should have been terrifying. Instead, it felt like the first truly honest thing he had done in years. "Stay inside for the rest of the day," he said, forcing himself to stand and step back. "Rest. I will finish the section alone." "No," she said immediately. "We are partners. I will rest for an hour and then I will join you, but I will not let you work alone." "Kora, partners," she repeated with a look that told him arguing would be pointless. "That was the agreement." He sighed, but he was smiling. "You are very stubborn. I learned from the best." The harvest took another 3 weeks to complete, and by the end of it, they had enough wheat to fill his small barn to capacity, and then some. It was the best yield he had ever had by a significant margin, and he knew it was only because of Kora's help, her strength and determination and refusal to quit even when the work seemed endless. They celebrated by cooking a proper meal, roasting one of the chickens and making bread from their own wheat, and Yates felt a satisfaction deeper than any he had known before. This was what success felt like, not just surviving but thriving, not just existing but building a life. They sold the wheat to a merchant who came through from the east, and Yates insisted on splitting the profits exactly as he had promised, counting out coins into 2 equal piles. Kora stared at her share like she had never seen money before. "This is mine?" she asked, disbelieving. "Half of it." That was the deal. Partners means equal shares. "Yates, this is more money than I have ever had in my life. Orcs do not use currency much. We trade and take and share within the clan, but individual wealth is not really a concept." "Well, it is yours now. You earned it." She picked up one of the coins and turned it over in her fingers, studying it. "What should I do with it?" "Whatever you want. Save it, spend it, bury it in the yard. It is yours to decide." "I want to invest it," she said slowly. "In next year's crop, if you will have me." Yates felt his heart skip. "Next year, you want to stay?" "I want to stay." She looked up at him, and there was no hesitation in her eyes now, only certainty. "If you will have me, I want to stay, not just for a season, for as long as you will let me." "Kora, you can stay for the rest of my life if you want to. There is nothing I want more than that." She set down the coin and crossed the room to him, and this time when she kissed him there was no hesitation, no uncertainty. They had worked side by side for weeks now, had built something real together, and the kiss tasted like a promise neither of them had quite dared to make until now. He wrapped his arms around her and held her close, aware of her strength and his own softness, aware that they were different in almost every way that mattered and exactly the same in the ways that did. "We will have to be careful," she said when they broke apart. "The marshal, the neighbors. They cannot know what I am. I know, we will figure it out. Maybe say you are from the far north, a different ethnic group. Your skin tone is unusual but not impossible. We will make it work. You should not have to lie for me. I will lie, cheat, and steal for you if that is what it takes. I do not care anymore about what is proper or legal or acceptable. I care about you. That is all that matters. She touched his face again, that gesture that was becoming familiar and dear. I love you, Yates Lawson. I did not think I was capable of loving anyone, but I love you. You should know that. His throat went tight with emotion. I love you too. I have for weeks, I think. I just did not know how to say it. You say it like that. That was good. He laughed and pulled her close again, burying his face in her hair, breathing in the scent of her that was becoming as familiar as his own. They stood like that for a long time, holding each other in the small house that had become theirs, the money from their harvest sitting on the table like tangible proof that impossible things could work if you were stubborn enough and brave enough and cared enough to try. The fall came cool and golden, and they spent it preparing for winter, preserving food and repairing the house and making plans for the next year's crop. Kora proved to be skilled with her hands, able to fix things he would have thrown away as hopeless. And slowly the homestead began to transform from a bachelor's rough camp into something that felt like a real home. She made curtains for the windows and repaired the chairs, and even built a second bed frame, though they continued to share the original because neither of them wanted the distance of separate sleeping spaces. The marshal came twice more before the snow fell, and each time Kora hid in the hills while Yates lied smoothly about his hired help having moved on. He hated the deception, but he hated more the alternative, which was losing her. He could tell the marshal was suspicious, but without proof, there was nothing the man could do, and eventually his visits became routine enough that they stopped causing panic. The neighbors were a different problem. Yates had never been particularly social, but complete isolation would draw suspicion. So he made occasional trips to town and to the nearest homestead to maintain appearances. He told everyone who asked that he was doing well, that the harvest had been good, that he was optimistic about the coming year. He did not mention Kora, and he carefully avoided inviting anyone to visit. It was lonely, maintaining the fiction that he still lived alone, and it made him angry that they had to hide what they had built together. One evening in late October, sitting by the fire while the first snow of the season fell outside, Kora asked him if he regretted any of it. Regret what? He said, looking up from the harness he was mending. This. Me. The complications I have brought into your life. Not for 1 second. Why would you ask that? She was quiet for a moment, staring into the fire. Because you could have had a simpler life. You could have found a human woman from town, married her, had children. A normal life. Instead, you are hiding an orc in your home and lying to everyone you know. That is not a small thing to give up. Yates set down the harness and moved to sit beside her, taking her hand in his. I never wanted that life. The normal one, the expected one. I left home to get away from expectations, remember? And as for hiding you, that is temporary. We will figure out a way to live openly eventually. But even if we do not, even if we have to hide for the rest of our lives, I would not trade this. I would not trade you, do you understand? You are not a complication or a burden. You are the best thing that has ever happened to me. I feel the same way, she said softly, but I worry. About what happens if we are discovered, about what they might do to you. Let me worry about that. Yates, no, listen to me. Whatever happens, we face it together. That is what partners means, that is what love means. I am not going to let fear of what might happen stop me from building a life with you. All right. She leaned her head against his shoulder and he felt her relax slightly. All right, together, he agreed. The winter was hard but manageable, and they spent the long dark months working on indoor projects and planning for spring. Kora taught him some of the orcish language, and he taught her to read human script, and they spent hours by the fire simply talking, learning each other's histories and dreams and fears. He learned that she had always been considered strange by her clan, too thoughtful, too willing to question. She learned that he had felt invisible his whole childhood, lost in the shuffle of brothers who were louder and more confident. They were both people who had never quite fit, and in finding each other, they had found the first place that felt like home. It was during one of these long conversations that Yates brought up something he had been thinking about for weeks. "What if we left?" he said carefully. "Went somewhere new, somewhere people do not know either of us. We could say we are married, that you are human. Start completely fresh." Kora looked at him with surprise. "You would leave your land, after everything you have built here?" "I would, if it meant we could live openly. This land is not worth more than you are. Nothing is." She was quiet for a long moment, and he could not quite read her expression. "That is a grand gesture, Yates, but I do not want you to give up what you have built. I do not want to be the reason you lose your dream." "My dream changed," he said simply. "It used to be about having land, proving I could make it on my own, but now it is about building a life with you. The location is negotiable. You are serious about this?" "Completely serious. We could go west to the new territories, claim land there where no one knows us, start over together properly." She turned to face him fully, her yellow eyes searching his face. "And if I said I wanted to stay here? That I did not want to run? Then we stay and we figure out how to make it work. But I wanted you to know that leaving is an option, that I would do it for you." She took his face in both her hands and kissed him hard, and when she pulled back there were tears on her cheeks. "How did I get so lucky?" she whispered. "How did I end up here with you?" "Heat stroke and desperation," he offered, and she laughed and cried at the same time. "I want to stay," she said. "I want to fight for what we have built here, not run from it." "But Yates, if that changes, if it becomes too dangerous, promise me you will consider it. Promise me you will not throw away your whole life just to prove a point." "I promise. But you have to promise me the same, that you will not leave to protect me, that we make decisions together." "I promise." They sealed it with another kiss, and then sat together watching the fire burn down to embers, both of them aware that they were choosing a difficult path, but neither of them willing to choose differently. They had found something rare and precious, and they would fight for it however they had to. Spring came late that year, and with it came a problem Yates had not anticipated. The merchant who had bought their wheat the previous fall returned in early March with a proposal. He had been so impressed with the quality of their crop that he wanted to contract them to grow twice as much the coming year, with payment up front for seed and supplies. It was an incredible opportunity, the kind that could transform the homestead from subsistence farming to genuine prosperity. But it also meant the merchant would need to visit regularly throughout the growing season to check on the crop, which meant hiding Kora would become much more difficult. They argued about it for 2 days, Yates insisting they could make it work and Kora arguing that the risk was too great. But ultimately, the opportunity was too good to pass up, and they agreed to take the contract with the understanding that they would have to be extremely careful. The merchant, whose name was Roland, arrived every 3 weeks like clockwork starting in April. Kora would hide in the hills during these visits, watching from a distance, and Yates would walk Roland through the fields and discuss the crop progress. It was exhausting maintaining the fiction, but the money was too good to refuse, and by June, they had enough saved that Yates started thinking seriously about expansion, about buying livestock or building a proper barn. It was on Roland's visit in early July that everything went wrong. Yates had been showing the merchant the irrigation system he had expanded with Kora's help, explaining how they had doubled the water capacity when Roland stopped abruptly. "You keep saying we," the merchant observed, "but I thought you worked alone." Yates felt his stomach drop but kept his expression casual. "Force of habit. I mean the general we, like when people say we think when they mean themselves." Roland looked at him with narrowed eyes, clearly not buying it. "Lawson, I have been doing this work for 15 years. I know what a one-man operation looks like, and this is not it. This farm is too well maintained, the work too advanced. You have help." "I hired some workers last season, do not lie to me." Roland's voice was sharp now. "I do not care if you have help. In fact, I prefer it. Better work gets done. But I need to know who I am doing business with. Is it a family member, a partner? Because if you have a partner, they need to be on the contract too." Yates weighed his options rapidly. He could keep lying, but Roland clearly did not believe him anymore. He could tell a partial truth, but that might lead to more questions he could not answer. Or he could take a risk, the kind of risk that could either save everything or destroy it. "I have a partner," he said carefully. "She helped with the harvest last year, and she has been helping with all the work this year. But she is very private, does not like strangers. She will not meet with you." "She," Roland's eyebrows rose. "You have a woman working this farm with you?" "Yes." "Are you married?" "Not officially." "But we might as well be." Roland studied him for a long moment, and Yates could see the calculation happening behind his eyes. Finally, the merchant nodded slowly. "All right, I respect privacy, but I need her name for the contract, and I need to know she is committed to seeing this through." "Can you give me that much? Her name is Kora. And yes, she is committed. More than you know." "Kora what?" Yates had not thought this far ahead. He grabbed for the first surname that came to mind that was not obviously human or obviously orc. "Kora Ironridge. And before you ask, she is from the far north, different ethnic group. Her family has been in human lands for 2 generations. It was not a great lie, but it was the best he could do on short notice. Roland looked skeptical but did not push. "Fine, Kora Ironridge. I will add her to the contract as co-owner of the operation. That means she gets her share of the profit directly, and she shares in the liability if things go wrong. Make sure she understands that." "She will understand." Roland left an hour later, and Yates immediately went to find Kora in the hills where she had been hiding. She listened to his recounting of the conversation with an expression that cycled through alarm, resignation, and finally something like hope. "So I am on a contract now," she said slowly. "With a human name and a human history. That makes it more real, more documented." "I know. I am sorry. I should have asked you first before giving him your name, but he put me on the spot and I could not think of anything else." "Do not apologize. You did the right thing. In fact, this might be better. If I am officially documented as your partner, that gives us legitimacy, a reason for why I am here." She paused, then added quietly, "Though Ironridge is my clan name. That was clever, using it as a human surname. It makes it feel less like a lie." "I did not even think of that. It just came out." She took his hand and squeezed it. "Sometimes the truth finds a way through even when we are trying to hide. Maybe that is a good sign." They stood together on the hillside, looking down at the farm spread out below them, at the fields they had planted, and the house they had repaired, and the life they were building against all odds. It was not perfect, and it was not safe, but it was theirs. That had to count for something. The rest of the summer passed in a blur of work and careful deception. Kora stayed hidden during Roland's visits, but between them, she worked openly in the fields, and slowly they both began to relax into the fiction they had created. She was Kora Ironridge from the far north, and they were partners in both business and life. and if anyone asked too many questions, they would figure out how to answer them. It was in late August, during the height of the second harvest, that the real test came. They were working in the field together, cutting wheat in the brutal afternoon heat, when Kora suddenly stopped and looked toward the road. "Someone is coming," she said quietly. "Multiple horses." Yates looked up and felt his blood turn cold. 5 riders were approaching, and even from a distance he could see the glint of badges. The territorial marshal, and he had brought deputies. "Run," Yates said urgently. "Now, hide in the barn and do not come out no matter what you hear." "Yates, go, please." She looked like she wanted to argue, but the sound of hoofbeats was getting closer. She dropped her scythe and ran for the barn, and Yates watched her disappear inside before turning to face the riders. His heart was pounding so hard he thought it might crack his ribs, but he kept his face calm as the marshal and his men reined in their horses. "Marshal Voss," Yates said, nodding a greeting. "What brings you out here with such numbers?" Marshal Voss was a lean man in his 50s with sharp eyes and a sharper mind. He dismounted slowly, and his deputies followed suit. "We have had reports, Lawson. Reports of an orc in this area. Woman, medium height, dark hair. Sound familiar?" Yates forced himself to look confused. "An orc? Out here? I have not seen anything like that. Are you sure the reports are reliable?" "Very sure. Multiple sightings over the past few months, always in this area. Witnesses say she has been seen working in fields, gathering water from the river. One witness even claimed to have seen her coming and going from your property." Voss's eyes were locked on Yates, reading every micro-expression. "So I will ask you again, have you seen an orc woman?" "No, sir, I have not. I work alone here." "Is that right?" Voss looked past him at the fields, at the expanded irrigation, at the clear signs of more work than one man could have accomplished. "Because that is not what the merchant Roland told me when I asked him about your operation. He said you have a partner. A woman named Kora Ironridge who does not like meeting strangers. He found that suspicious. So did I." Yates felt sweat that had nothing to do with the heat running down his back. "Kora is my partner, yes, but she is human, from the far north. Then you will not mind if we meet her. Clear this whole thing up." "She is not here right now. She went to town for supplies." "Really? That is interesting, because I came from town and I did not see anyone on the road. No wagon, no horse. How exactly did she get there?" Yates scrambled for an answer and came up empty. Voss smiled, but it was not a kind expression. "I think you are lying to me, Lawson. I think you have been hiding an orc on your property, and that is illegal in 3 of the 4 territories, including this one. So I am going to search your homestead, and if I find what I think I am going to find, you are going to be arrested for harboring a hostile." "She is not hostile," Yates said before he could stop himself, and the moment the words were out he knew he had made a fatal mistake. Voss's expression turned grim. "So you admit she exists. Where is she?" Yates said nothing, his mind racing through options and finding none that ended well. Voss nodded to his deputies and they began spreading out, moving toward the house and barn. Yates wanted to fight to stop them, but he was unarmed and they were 5, and fighting would only make things worse. "Wait," a voice called out, and Yates' heart sank as Kora emerged from the barn, her hands raised in surrender. "I am here. Do not hurt him. This was not his fault." The deputies immediately drew their weapons. A mix of rifles and pistols all pointed at Kora, and Yates felt rage and terror in equal measure flood through him. "Do not shoot," he shouted, moving to put himself between Kora and the guns. "She has done nothing wrong. She is no threat to anyone." "Step aside, Lawson," Voss ordered. "No, if you want to take her, you go through me first." Kora grabbed his arm, trying to pull him back. "Yates, do not be stupid. They will shoot you." I do not care. I will not let them take you. You do not have a choice, Voss said, and his voice was almost gentle. Lawson, I understand you might have feelings for this orc, but the law is clear. She is not allowed to be here, and you are not allowed to harbor her. Step aside, and maybe I can minimize the charges against you. I will not step aside, and she has a name. Her name is Kora, and she is my partner, and she has done nothing but help me build this farm. She has broken no laws, hurt no one. She is guilty of nothing except being born orc. She exists, Voss said bluntly. In this territory, that is crime enough. The words hung in the air, ugly and final, and Yates felt something in him break and reform into something harder. He had spent his whole life following rules, being the good son, the forgettable brother, the law-abiding citizen. He had swallowed his words and accepted his place and never made trouble, but he was done with that. He was done letting other people's laws and prejudices dictate his life. Then your laws are wrong, he said clearly, and I will not follow them. Voss sighed. I was afraid you would say that. Deputies, arrest them both. What happened next occurred in a blur of motion that Yates would remember in fragments for the rest of his life. The deputies moved forward. Yates refused to move. Kora tried to push past him to surrender peacefully. One of the deputies grabbed for Yates and he shoved back. Suddenly, everyone was shouting and someone fired a shot into the air as a warning, and Kora roared, a sound of pure animal fury, and broke away from the man trying to restrain her. For a moment, Yates thought she was going to attack, thought she was going to prove every horrible stereotype right, but instead, she grabbed him and ran. She was so much stronger than any of them, and she used that strength to simply pick him up and sprint for the tree line bordering his property, moving faster than any of the horses could react. Shots fired behind them, but either the deputies were not aiming to kill or Kora was too fast, because they made it into the trees without being hit. What are you doing? Yates gasped as she set him down and kept pulling him deeper into the forest. We cannot outrun them. I am not trying to outrun them. I am trying to get us somewhere we can think. They ran for what felt like hours but was probably minutes, Kora leading the way with a speed and certainty that suggested she had scouted these woods thoroughly during all those months of hiding. Finally, they stopped in a small clearing deep in the forest, and Yates bent double, gasping for breath. We are fugitives now, he managed between breaths. They will hunt us. We will never be able to go back. I know. Kora's face was stricken. Yates, I am so sorry. I should have left months ago. I should never have stayed. Now you have lost everything because of me. Stop, he said sharply, straightening up. I chose this. I chose you, and I would make the same choice again. But your land is just land. You are irreplaceable. He took her face in his hands, making her look at him. Listen to me. I do not care that we are running. I do not care that I lost the farm. The only thing I care about is that we are together. Do you understand? You are my home now, not that house, not those fields. You. She made a sound that was half laugh and half sob and pulled him into a fierce embrace. I love you, she whispered against his hair. I love you so much it frightens me. I love you too, and we are going to figure this out, together. They held each other in the clearing while the sun moved across the sky, both of them aware that the deputies would be organizing a search, that they had limited time before this forest became a trap instead of a refuge. But for just a moment, they let themselves have this. The simple human and orc need to be held by the person you loved when the world turned hostile. We should go west, Kora said finally, pulling back to look at him. Like you suggested before. To the new territories where they do not have the same laws. We can claim land there, start over. That means walking for weeks, maybe months. We do not have supplies, money, anything. We have each other. That will have to be enough. Yates thought about everything he was leaving behind. 3 years of backbreaking work. The homestead he had built with his own hands. The money from the harvest that was probably sitting in his house right now, uncollected. The life he had carefully constructed. All of it gone in the span of an hour. And yet, looking at Kora's face, at the fierce determination and love in her yellow eyes, he found he did not regret a single thing. "All right," he said. "West it is. But we do this properly. We are not just running. We are choosing a new life together. When we get there, when we claim new land, we do it as partners, as equals, and we never hide again. I am done hiding. You realize that means telling people I am orc. I realize. And if they have a problem with it, they can take it up with me." She smiled then, brilliant and fierce. "You are either the bravest human I have ever met or the most foolish. Can I be both? I suppose you will have to be, if you are going to build a life with me." They kissed then, standing in a clearing in the middle of a forest with lawmen hunting them and nothing to their names but the clothes on their backs and the love they had built. And Yates thought that if this was foolishness, he would be a fool for the rest of his life gladly. They began walking west that very afternoon, staying off the roads and moving through the wilderness with the caution of prey animals. Kora knew how to hunt and which plants were edible, skills from her orcish upbringing that Yates had never needed before but was desperately grateful for now. They ate roasted rabbit and wild tubers, drank from streams, and slept under the stars or in caves when they could find them. It was hard living, harder than anything Yates had experienced even in his first brutal year of homesteading, but they faced it together and that made all the difference. On the 4th night, huddled together for warmth as the temperature dropped, Kora asked him if he was sorry. "For what?" he said, genuinely confused. "For all of this. For losing your home because of me. I already told you that was not your fault. But if you had never found me in that field, if you had just left me to die, you would still have your farm, your life, everything you worked for." Yates was quiet for a moment, thinking about how to make her understand. "When I was 17, he said finally, "I worked for a year as a hand on a large estate. The owner was rich, successful, had everything anyone could want. But he was also the most miserable man I ever met, because he had built his whole life around acquiring things instead of around people. He died alone in that big house, surrounded by everything he owned and mourned by no one. I swore then that I would never be like that I would rather have nothing and be surrounded by people who mattered than have everything and be alone." He turned to look at her, tucking a strand of dark hair behind her pointed ear. "You matter, Kora. More than land, more than money, more than success. You matter, and I would choose you over all of it every single time." She was crying again, and he wiped her tears away with his thumb, marveling at how quickly this fierce orc woman had become the center of his entire world. They had known each other less than 6 months, had been running for less than a week, and yet he could not imagine his life without her in it. It was irrational and impractical and completely outside any plan he had ever made for himself, and it was the best thing that had ever happened to him. They crossed into the new territories in early September, recognizing the boundary by the cairns that marked the edge of settled law. Beyond this point, the rules were different, the land wilder, the opportunities greater. It was here that orcs and humans lived in an uneasy but generally peaceful coexistence, where mixed communities were uncommon but not unheard of, where the old prejudices held less power simply because survival mattered more than social conventions. They walked for another 2 weeks before they found what they were looking for. A river valley with good soil, fresh water, and no sign of previous settlement within miles. It was perfect homesteading land, exactly the kind of place where 2 people could build something lasting if they were willing to work for it. They stood on a rise overlooking the valley, and Yates felt a sense of rightness settle over him that had nothing to do with the land itself and everything to do with the woman standing beside him. "This could work," Kora said quietly. "We could build here. We could. It will be hard. We will have to start from nothing, but we could do it." She turned to him, and there was a question in her eyes that she had not quite figured out how to ask. He understood anyway because he had been thinking the same thing. "Kora Ironridge," he said formally, taking both her hands in his. "We have been partners in work and partners in running and partners in about everything else that matters. I would like to make it official if you are willing. I know human marriage customs are probably strange to you, and I do not even know if they mean anything out here in the territories. But I want to be bound to you in whatever way you will accept. I want to build this life with you as my wife if you will have me." Her eyes went wide and bright, and for a moment she just stared at him. Then she started laughing, a joyful sound that echoed across the valley. "Are you proposing to me, Yates Lawson?" "I believe I am, yes. You do realize that you are a human and I am an orc, and that is going to raise some eyebrows even out here." "I do realize. I do not care. You do realize that I do not have a fancy dress or flowers or any of the things human women expect for proposals. I do not care about that either. I care about you. So what do you say?" She pulled him into a kiss that was her answer, fierce and tender and full of promise. When they broke apart, she was grinning. "Yes," she said. "Yes, I will marry you. I will be your wife and your partner and whatever else you need me to be for the rest of our lives." "That is all I need," he said. "Just you." They were married 3 days later by a traveling priest who asked no questions and raised no objections when he saw that the bride was orc and the groom was human. It was a simple ceremony, just the three of them standing beside the river with the sun setting behind the mountains, but it was perfect. They spoke human vows because those were the ones the priest knew, but afterward, Kora taught Yates the orcish words for binding and commitment, and they spoke those to each other as well. 2 traditions, 2 peoples, becoming one family. That night, they made love for the first time under the stars, tender and careful and passionate, learning each other's bodies the way they had learned each other's hearts. Kora was gentle despite her strength, aware of his comparative fragility, and Yates was patient and attentive, wanting her first time with a human to be something beautiful. It was awkward in places and perfect in others, and when they finally fell asleep tangled together in their bedroll, Yates felt more complete than he had in his entire life. The first year in the valley was brutal. They built a small cabin before the first snow, barely more than 4 walls and a roof, but it was theirs and it was shelter, and that was enough. They cleared land for planting and set up a primitive irrigation system using everything Yates had learned on his previous homestead. Kora hunted and provided meat while Yates focused on preparing for their first crop. They worked from dawn until dark every day and fell into bed each night exhausted and sore and happy. Other settlers began arriving in the valley that second spring, humans and orcs, and even a few mixed families like themselves. They formed a loose community, helping each other with larger projects and trading goods and skills. Some of the newcomers were surprised to see a human-orc marriage, but most were too busy surviving to care much, and gradually it simply became a fact of life that Yates and Kora Lawson were together, and that was that. Their first harvest was modest but successful, enough to see them through the next winter with surplus to trade. The second harvest was better, and by the 3rd year they had expanded their operation enough to hire help during the busy season. The homestead became a farm, the farm became a success, and through it all they worked side by side as they had from the beginning. It was in the 5th year, after their 3rd good harvest in a row, that Yates finally allowed himself to believe they had truly made it. The farm was profitable. They had a real house with glass windows and a wood floor. They had neighbors who had become friends, and they had each other. The life they had built was everything he had dreamed of and more, because he had built it with someone who mattered. One particularly hot afternoon in July, they were working in the wheat field together, cutting the grain that had ripened to perfect gold. The sun beat down mercilessly, turning the air thick and shimmering, and Yates felt sweat running down his back, despite the wide-brimmed hat he wore. Beside him, Kora worked with her usual steady intensity, but he could see the way she squinted against the glare, the way the heat was affecting even her. Without thinking, he took off his hat and reached over to place it on her head. She stopped working immediately, looking up at him in complete surprise, one hand going to the brim to touch it as if she could not quite believe it was there. "What are you doing?" she asked, stunned. "You need it more than I do right now. You are working harder. But it is your hat. So, you are my wife. What is mine is yours." He smiled at her, at the way she looked with his two large hats sitting on her head at a slightly crooked angle, at the expression of pure wonder on her face, like he had given her something precious instead of just a ratty old hat. "Yates," she said softly, and her voice was thick with emotion. "I love you. I love you too. Now get back to work. We have 3 more rows to finish before dinner." She laughed, but she kept the hat on, and Yates worked beside her with his head uncovered and his heart full, thinking about everything that had led to this moment. He thought about the day he had found her collapsed in his field, about the choice he had made to save her instead of letting her die. He thought about the marshal and the deputies and the flight into the woods, about losing everything he had built and gaining something infinitely more valuable. He thought about the long walk west and the valley they had found, and the life they had made here against all odds. And he thought about this moment right now, working under the scorching sun beside the woman he loved, sharing his hat because that was what partners did, what people who chose each other did. It was such a small gesture, meaningless to anyone else, but to them, it meant everything. It meant trust and care and the daily choice to put each other first. It meant they were building something that would last not because it was easy, but because they were willing to work for it every single day. That evening, after they had finished the day's work and eaten a simple dinner of bread and stew, they sat on the porch of their house watching the sun set over the mountains in the distance. Kora still had his hat on, and Yates did not ask for it back. She looked content in a way that made his chest ache, settled and happy and finally, truly home. "You ever think about your clan?" he asked quietly. "Wonder what happened to them?" "Sometimes," she admitted. "But they are not my family anymore. You are. This community is. The life we built is. No regrets. None. You. Not a single one." She leaned against him, and he put his arm around her shoulders, and they sat like that, as the sky turned from gold to pink to purple. 2 people who had found each other against all probability, and built something real out of nothing but stubbornness and love, and the willingness to keep choosing each other every single day. In the years that followed, their farm continued to prosper. They added livestock and a proper barn, expanded their fields, and even took on an apprentice, a young orc boy who had been orphaned and needed a place to learn a trade. They raised him as their own, teaching him to farm and to raid, and to understand that the world was bigger and more complicated than any single tradition or prejudice. Kora became known throughout the valley as someone to go to for help, her strength and practical wisdom making her invaluable during harvests and building projects. Yates served as an informal mediator when disputes arose between settlers, his patient nature and genuine care for people making him trusted by both humans and orcs. Together, they became pillars of their small community, proof that different peoples could not just coexist, but thrive together. They never forgot how close they had come to losing everything, how easily it all could have ended differently. But they also never let that fear control them. Instead, they chose to live openly and honestly, to be exactly who they were without apology, and in doing so, they gave permission to others to do the same. Mixed couples became more common in the valley, and eventually it stopped being something people remarked on at all. 20 years after that day in the wheat field, Yates stood on the porch of their expanded house and looked out at the farm they had built. The original cabin was now a storage shed. The field stretched as far as he could see, worked by a mix of human and orc families who paid rent and lived on their land. The community they had helped found had grown into a proper settlement with a school and a meeting house and plans for a church that would serve all faiths. And beside him, as always, stood Kora. Her hair was streaked with gray now, and there were lines around her eyes, but she was still strong and fierce, and the most beautiful thing he had ever seen. She still wore his hat sometimes when she worked, even though she had perfectly good hats of her own, because it had become a symbol between them of that day, that moment when he had given her something of his and she had looked up completely stunned and realized that this was real, that this love was real, that they had made it. "Good harvest this year," she observed, watching the workers in the fields below. "Best in 5 years," Yates agreed. "We might actually be able to afford that new irrigation system you have been wanting. I still think the old way works fine." "You always think the old way works fine. You are deeply suspicious of innovation." "I am practical," she corrected, but she was smiling. "Innovation is just a fancy word for things that break more often." He laughed and pulled her close, breathing in the familiar scent of her, earth and sun and home. "I love you," he said, "because some things never got old to say." "I love you too," she replied, as she had replied every day for 20 years, as she would reply every day for however many years they had left. They stood together on the porch as the sun set over the valley they had claimed, the community they had built, the impossible life they had made real through nothing but stubbornness and love, and the simple willingness to put a hat on someone's head when the sun burned too bright. It was not the life either of them had planned or expected. It was better. And as the stars came out one by one and the lights began to glow in the windows of the settlement below, Yates Lawson looked at his wife, his partner, his best friend, and knew with absolute certainty that every choice he had made, every risk he had taken, every convention he had broken, had been worth it for this. For her, for them, for the proof that love could bridge any divide if you were brave enough to try. They went inside together as the night grew cool, into the house they had built with their own hands, and closed the door on a day well lived in a life well chosen, knowing that tomorrow they would rise and do it all again, together, the way they had always done and always would. This was their ending, but it was also their beginning and their middle, all the beautiful ordinary days that added up to a life, to a love, to a home. And it was enough. It was more than enough. It was everything.